cost-benefit analysis. The second outlook in terms of over-the-horizon threats is that the balance of power has been demonstrably shifting, not necessarily in our favor. One thing we need to pay attention to is one element of the armed forces that we have mortgaged or ceded: air power. In other words, to prepare for the next generation of combat over Nagorno-Karabakh, helicopters, rotary wing aircraft are much more important than actually reflected in our own order of battle or arsenal. Secondly, the consolidation and unification of Armenia's air defense within the Russian CSTO unified air system has also diminished our air capability in the future. The third criticism is focused on missing elements in national power. For example, Armenia's military strength will always be limited as long as we do not have deeper democracy and a stronger economy. We need to apply the American model of DIME, D-I-M-E. It's national power based on diplomatic, informational, military, and economic power. In other words, as impressive defense reform has been in Armenia, it has not been matched by a balanced foreign policy. It has not been matched by durable democratization or economic development. These are fundamental weaknesses that will be obstacles that will prevent defense reform from going forward. Another glaring weakness is in national security, which is a related aspect of defense reform. In national security, the process is flawed as well as the product. The National Security Council does not fulfill its expectations or obligations. As we transform to a parliamentary form of government, national security has only an increased imperative. And national security decision-making is actually greatly hindered by over-centralization in the president's office and without adequate analytical or intelligence support. A related aspect is the fourth factor, this threat misperception, where the mission and mandate of the Armenian armed forces needs to be further modernized. For example, in the event of earthquake and emergency response, the mission, mandate, and role, the function of the armed forces needs to be better calibrated, better planned. Counterterrorism, fortunately, has not been a major priority, but we would be guilty of complacency and a lack of preparedness if we did not increase resources and attention to counterterrorism. And there were times when the military units from Nagorno-Karabakh were overused in cases of regime protection, March 1st, 2008. Fortunately, the Armenian armed forces, in terms of civil-military relations, has always refrained from being directly engaged or involved in Armenian politics. But we need to be vigilant to maintain that. What we also see is any pressure on the armed forces in elections for vote buying is especially egregious in undermining unit discipline. Now, part of the threat misperception is, of course, exaggerated threat of Turkey militarily, but I would also argue psychologically, too many Armenian governments perhaps found it politically, domestically effective to always have an enemy. In other words, despite the threat from Azerbaijan, we also have to prepare for two scenarios. One is to prepare for the day after a peace agreement is signed. And how do we guarantee the security of Nagorno-Karabakh and Armenia the day after a peace agreement? The second scenario, how do we prepare for the day when we no longer have an enemy to unite us, an enemy to obscure or to hide our own domestic shortcomings? And finally, the fifth and final factor in this over-the-horizon assessment is the strategic vision. And lately, Armenia very quietly, stealthily, has been making progress in strategic vision militarily. We are deepening ties with individual Western countries, Poland, Germany, Greece, the United States, mill-to-mill, country-to-country bilateral relations, while also deepening ties with the Partnership for Peace of NATO, and pursuing a third alternative vector, Armenian-Chinese military cooperation, and in the fields of military education, is a welcome, important sign of progress to regain the sense of balance and to give Armenia militarily much more options than either its neighbors or its friends. And finally, in conclusion, it's most important to say there is no conclusion. This is a dynamic, not static process. Military reform by its very nature may have an objective, an end state, but it's never over. It's never done. Military reform must be ongoing and constantly changing. Thank you.